Officer. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the last briefing of your day. Allow me to introduce your briefers today. On the far left is the Director for Operations for the Missile Defense Agency, Ms. Michelle C. Atkinson. And on her right is the Director of the Missile Defense Agency, Vice Admiral Jon A. Hill. I'm going to hand off to Admiral Hill. We'll run through some slides for you on the FY21 budget request, followed by some time for questions. When we do get to the questions, please remember to identify yourself and the agency you represent. Allow the boss one question to follow up immediately, and then let me move on so I can make sure we run around the room and make sure everyone gets a chance to ask a question. If there's time afterwards, I'll come back to you again. Sound fair? With that, Vice Admiral Hill.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you for taking time today. We're looking forward to give you an overview where we are with the President's budgets 2021 for missile defense. And I'm going to go ahead and just turn it over to Michelle Atkinson, who will take you through it.
Thank you, Admiral. Good afternoon. I appreciate the opportunity to brief you today on the Missile Defense Agency's fiscal year 21 budget request. Our budget request is consistent with the 2019 Missile Defense Review and the Department's commitment to the irreversible implementation of the National Defense Strategy, which is our guidepost and drives our decision-making. Next chart. In FY21, we will continue to strengthen and expand the deployment of defenses for our nation, deployed forces, allies, and international partners against increasingly capable missile threats. The Missile Defense Program supports our warfighters and the needs of the combatant commanders by developing, integrating, testing, and deploying interceptors, sensors, and improvements to the layered missile defense system. Next chart. Current global trends indicate that ballistic missiles, hypersonic glide vehicles, and cruise missiles are becoming more and more capable, due in part to the proliferation of advanced technologies and systems with more global reach, increasing speed, and greater accuracy. Adversaries are expanding missile capabilities in 3 different directions simultaneously: increasing the capabilities of their existing missile systems, adding new and unprecedented types of missile capabilities to their arsenals, and integrating offensive missiles into their military exercising and war planning. Next chart. Our current missile defense system can defeat today's current ballistic missile capabilities of our adversaries. First, the system detects the launch of the threat missile and begins development of a fire control solution necessary to track and maintain what we call birth-to-death custody or control of the threat. Based on this fire control solution, our interceptors engage and then negate the threat. Our command and control system, called C2BMC, is the all-domain backbone that enables this detect, control, and engage sequence. The projected missile threat is complex and includes evolving ballistic and hypersonic missile threats. It is critical that we develop innovative and breakthrough technologies to outpace rogue state offensive missile capabilities against our homeland. Next chart. The President's budget request supports the Department's irreversible implementation of the National Defense Strategy by reprioritizing funds to improve homeland defense. This includes fully funding the Next Generation Interceptor Program, or NGI, and adapting regional systems such as Aegis and THAAD to provide a layered homeland defense. Further, our budget aligns with the major department themes to strengthen readiness and invest in modernization, strengthen alliances and interoperability, and implement reform initiatives to improve performance and accountability. In aligning with these department themes, our PB21 budget request focuses on the expanding missile threat. The missile defense system is now being designed to address not only the ballistic missile threat, but also hypersonic threats and cruise missile threats to our homeland, while also preserving regional missile defense priorities and the advanced technology development necessary to ensure future capabilities. Next chart. The President's budget priorities for missile defense are nested within the National Defense Strategy priorities and are as follows. First, continue to focus on sustainment and improve readiness of our fielded systems to maintain the highest level of system readiness and reliability. Second, continue to build out the missile defense force structure. And third, develop and deliver new capability to address the evolving threats. Next chart. This chart summarizes the FY19 through 21 MDA budget by appropriation type. Our FY21 total request is $9.2 billion, of which $7.2 billion is RDT&E. The next three charts will address some of the specific budget line items in our FY21 budget request and are organized in order of the Missile Defense System battle sequence that I described previously. Next chart. We are requesting $593 million in FY21 for C2BMC. We continue to support and upgrade C2BMC capability across 18 time zones with hardened networks supporting NORTHCOM, INDOPACOM, EUCOM, and CENTCOM. We will also continue development and integration of space sensors to track, type, and warn of advancing missile threats. We are requesting $515 million to support and sustain 12 TP2 radars, which includes forward-based mode radars in Japan, Turkey, Israel, and U.S. Central Command. This funding also continues software development for discrimination capabilities and other upgrades to improve TP2 radar performance. For the Long Range Discrimination Radar, or LRDR, we are requesting $137 million in FY21 to complete development and fielding of this radar. This radar, which will be available in December 20, is a critical mid-course sensor that improves missile defense system target discrimination capability and a more efficient use of the ground-based missile system. We are requesting $118 million for the sea-based X-band radar, or SBX, which provides precision mid-course tracking and discrimination to protect the homeland. The FY21 program continues SBX operations at sea to maintain this important contribution to homeland defense. Our budget also requests $20 million for the Cobra Dane radar to continue radar refurbishment and life extension in partnership with the U.S. Air Force. We are requesting $66 million for MDA space efforts in FY21 to operate the Space-Based Kill Assessment Sensor Network and sustain the two space tracking and surveillance system satellites. Next chart. The President's budget remains committed to delivering, expanding, and sustaining our nation's homeland missile defenses and requests $1.9 billion in FY21 for the Ground-Based Mid-Course Defense, or GMD system. In FY21, the budget supports currently deployed ground-based interceptors, or GBIs, and completion of the additional missile field in Alaska to enable future fielding of the next-generation interceptors in the future. The budget also supports construction of a redundant communication building at Fort Greely, Alaska. The FY21 request for Aegis missile defense is $1.8 billion to continue upgrades to the Aegis weapon system and procure additional missiles. We will procure 34 Aegis SM-3 Block 1B missiles for deployment on land at the Aegis ashore sites in Romania and Poland, and at sea on multi-mission Aegis ships. This brings the total number of SM-3 Block 1B missiles procured to 395 by the end of FY21. In FY21, we will also continue the multi-year procurement for the SM-3 Block 1B missile. We will procure 6 SM-3 Block 2A missiles for a total of 60 missiles procured through FY21. We will continue to develop and implement Aegis weapon system upgrades to support the Navy's newest destroyers with the new Spy-6 radar, as well as upgrade sensors on the older ships in the fleet. As previously discussed, the President's budget will initiate the development of layered homeland defense capability that includes upgrades to the Aegis BMD weapon system and SM-3 Block 2A missile to augment homeland defenses to defeat ICBM threats. To complete the European Phased Adaptive Approach Phase 3, our budget request includes $96 million for the Aegis ashore site in Poland. Due to construction delays, this site is now planned to be available in 2022. The FY21 request for THAAD is $1 billion. This procures additional interceptors and continues upgrades for the 7 fielded THAAD batteries and THAAD training equipment. This budget procures 41 THAAD interceptors in support of the U.S. Army, bringing the total to 625 by the end of FY21. Additionally, in FY21, we will complete the integration of missile defense capabilities on the Korean Peninsula. We will initiate the development of an improved THAAD interceptor for layered homeland defense. The demonstration flight test for this is currently planned for the FY23 timeframe. Next chart. MDA develops advanced missile defense technologies for integration into the missile defense system to defeat the rapidly evolving threats. The investment strategy for these technologies balances the need to address the most dangerous current threats with the need to position the United States to respond to threat developments in the future. We are requesting $207 million for the Hypersonic Defense Program to assess architecture alternatives and develop a regional glide phase weapon system to keep pace with these evolving threats. Our request for the Technology Maturation Initiatives is $67 million. This continues discrimination sensor development to demonstrate precision track of advanced threats at extended ranges. We are requesting $378 million to conduct flight, ground, and cybersecurity testing, and $536 million to develop and deliver threat representative targets used in our flight tests. Key test events in FY21 will include FTX-26, an LRDR operational flight test to demonstrate a GMD simulated engagement against an ICBM representative target with countermeasures. FTM-33, an Aegis flight test to demonstrate 2 salvo engagement firing 4 Standard Missile SM-6 Dual 2s against 2 short-range ballistic missiles, and also FTT-21, a THAAD flight test to demonstrate THAAD battery control of a Patriot Missile Segment Enhancement, or MSE, interceptor against a short-range ballistic missile. Our budget request of $500 million in FY21 for Israeli programs continues our long-standing support of U.S.-Israeli cooperative programs to include Iron Dome, David Sling, and Arrow weapon systems. Next chart. This slide provides a comparison of total funding for major MDA programs. This allocation of funds provides the proper balance to support deployed systems, provide force structure to the warfighter, and to address the advancing threat. Next slide. Our PB21 request aligns to the 3 lines of effort previously discussed. While we'll continue to support deployed systems and deliver capacity to our warfighters, PB21 shifts investments to deliver new capabilities to include the Next Generation Interceptor development and the new layered homeland defense effort. Next chart. In conclusion, the FY21 President's budget for MDA request is $9.2 billion and reflects the Department's commitment to the National Defense Strategy and Missile Defense Review priorities to include layered homeland defense while maintaining regional defenses. The Admiral and I will now take a few questions.
Dan, please.
Thanks. Dan Wasserly from Janes. You mentioned the funding for hypersonic defenses. Has that decreased a little bit this year compared to what was enacted last year? And you mentioned a regional glide phase defense program, but I thought there was another one, a hypersonic defense weapons system. Has that gone away, or has that been renamed?
That was a lot of questions. So first of all, for the hypersonic, last year we received a $250 million congressional plus-up for the hypersonic defense weapon, and so that's why it looks like our budget is decreased this year, but it actually increased from our previous budget request. And can you repeat your second question, please?
There were 2 programs that I was aware of, at least, for hypersonic defense. There was the regional glide phase program that you mentioned, but then also a hypersonic defense weapons system. Has that been renamed or gone away? Or?
So I think you might be speaking of the sensor capability that is a space sensing system called Hypersonic and Ballistic Tracking Sensor System, HBTSS. That could be it. And then what we're doing now is concept exploration and technology maturation to support a regional glide phase weapon. So those are the 2 pieces. It may have been grouped together as a hypersonic weapon system at some point in the vernacular. I'm not sure.
These were the ones that had selected Lockheed Martin's Valkyrie, DART, Boeing's Hypervelocity Interceptor, something from Raytheon.
Those were the weapons concepts developments that support the regional glide phase weapon.
Perfect, thank you.
Yes, sir.
Phil.
I was just hoping you could let us know the extent to which, if at all, Iran's attack on al-Assad might have informed this budget, and if you could give us any kind of takeaways about your assessment of Iran's capabilities based on that attack and what you might need to do.
Yeah, there's not a lot I can say in this discussion about that. I will tell you that when Michelle talks about building out force structure, I think that's important. When you look at what we're really trying to do in terms of Homeland Defense with the GMDs, being as flexible as we can with Aegis ships and Aegis Ashore and THAAD batteries and Patriot with the Army. It is about providing flexibility to the combatant command. So what we learn from those sorts of things is, the increased flexibility. One of the things that we do all the time in support of the services is dynamic force employment of many of those systems, and it's to demonstrate our ability to quickly move and put into position if required. So I would tell you that the rogue threat, both North Korea and Iran, always drives our thinking and the lay down in the budget.
But I guess, so what you're saying, I didn't just to be as clear I understood, you're saying that you need more flexibility, or you're building in more flexibility in your, I didn't understand the answer, sorry.
Okay, well, let me see if I can just clarify a little bit. What you were really asking me, I think, is a question more appropriate for the operational forces. CENTCOM or INDOPACOM, depending on which theater you're speaking to, they can talk to you about effectiveness and, the outcome of any recent attacks and those sort of things. I can't really speak to that. What we do, though, as an agency is we provide, those capabilities to the services and to the combatant commands, and we try to give them as much flexibility as possible. That was really what I was trying to tell you.
Tony.
Two questions, one for Ms. Atkinson and one for the Admiral. The Juon, once it's completed in South Korea, what capability will it give the U.S. forces there using THAAD and Patriot to talk to each other that they don't have now? And for the Admiral, what's the way forward for the next generation interceptor in terms of how much is in the FIDB? When will there be an RFP? And how many decades will it take to field this one?
Okay. Let me go. I'll answer the Jian question for the Republic of Korea. Right. Gotcha. I'll kind of break it up into the three phases to kind of give you a sense. So phase one, which we have tested and demonstrated the capability, is to extend or remote the launchers of THAAD. So if you think of THAAD battery and some number of launchers, if you can separate the launchers away from the battery, that gives you a lot of flexibility on the peninsula. So you could put the battery further back, you can move the radar back, you can put the launchers forward, you can bring in additional launchers. And so that capability is not in a typical THAAD battery today. So that's exactly what General Brooks at the time was asking for, is that ability to move the battery back, add additional launchers, or move them forward. Take care of southern ports, for example, instead of protecting the north. The next part of that is to do launch on remote for the Patriot missile using the THAAD radar. So if you take a TPY-2, which can see a lot further than a Patriot battery radar, then now you can extend and take full advantage of the kinematic capability of a Patriot. So the PAC-3 MSE missile, now we can fly it out as far as it'll go because now you're controlling it and feeding it information from a forward-based radar TPY-2 off of THAAD battery. And then that third piece is to integrate Patriot missiles into the THAAD launcher. And what that now gives the combatant command and the soldiers on the ground the capability of doing is using the right missile for the right threat at the right time. Does that make sense to you, Tom?
It does.
Okay, so that's sort of the overall GEON piece. NGI, in terms of funding,
Would the GEON be complete, though? When do you think that's
we
when-
complete that in 21.
This year,
Right.
okay.
So yes, so we're completing our testing this year, and then we have another test scheduled out in 21, and then we'll go ahead and do the material release with the Army.
Okay, so next one.
Okay, and then NGI. So you had asked specifically about dollars over the fight, in which I'll turn to the Director for Operations and Comptroller, and she can talk to the money.
It's a number, $4.9 billion in the FY 21 through 25 budget for NGI.
Okay, and then the request for proposal to industry is ready to be released to industry, and I anticipate right now our plan is to get it out by the end of this month.
And you must have a feel for when you'd like to have this thing fielded eventually if it works.
Yeah, absolutely. So depending on what industry comes back with, right, that's always the important part for us to have, because right now you work off of government cost estimates, you work on government-based cost and schedule estimates. But we'll start testing, in the mid-20s, right, 25, 26 or so, and then you start to put them in the ground out there in 27, 28 and beyond.
Okay, given that $1 billion was spent on this disaster and nothing came through it, what lessons do you incorporate into this current solicitation?
Right. Some great lessons, and that's a great question. Lots of great lessons, and it is a great question. So you mentioned about $1 billion, and that's right. It was, I think, $1.2 billion is what has been mentioned before in terms of what was invested into the redesigned kill vehicle, RKV. Now you have to remember, RKV was always meant to be a manufacturing and production improvement to the current GPIs, right? So you could go build more of them. There wasn't a big, I would say, capability that we were going after at the time. It was just being able to build more of them, build them quickly. So we learned a lot. right? One of the things that we're doing different in NGI, first of all, we're taking a hard look at all requirements across the space, and that's everything from environment to man-made and natural environments. And so this thing's going to operate in a tough environment. We know as a threat evolves, it becomes a harder environment. So what I'm excited about, and I know it's frustrating when you look at how long it takes to go design and develop and deploy these things, the fact is the threat is evolving. It is changing, and this is the first time when you think about it, you go all the way back to when the first one was put in the ground in 2004, where we've really taken a holistic look at that full range of requirements. We've worked very closely with Northcom and with Strategic Command, and we've come through an Operational Forces Standing Committee. We have a JROC tomorrow, release the RFP by the end of the month, get the feedback from industry, and industry has been very responsive. We've had a number of industry days, a number of RFIs, great communications with industry, and they've all come back and said we can build to that. So now the question is, what will they build, and what's the timeline, and what will we select in the end game? So our intent is to go to award by the end of the year.
December, thank you.
Yeah.
Jen, please.
Hi, Jen Judson with
Hi,
Defense
Jen.
News. How are you?
Great, thank you.
Just to follow up on NGI, you said that it sounds like it's not going to get into the ground until 27, 28 or so. So what are you considering as potential gap fillers, if anything, in the meantime? You've built missile silos that you won't be putting anything into. So can you talk a little bit about that? And my other question has to do with THAAD and the interceptor that you plan to develop for that. Can you talk a little bit more about the characteristics of that? Is that extended range, or there's something else that you're looking for to make that more of a homeland defense?
So I think you're connecting the dots in the way that Ms. Atkinson briefed it. So if you have an existing fleet like we have today that we are very confident in, it handles the current threat. We can defend Hawaii. We can defend the continental United States against the threats where they stand today. We know they're going to evolve. So we know that sometime in the mid to the late 20s, you'll start to see a fall off in the ability of that missile to take on those threats. You'll start to see reliability issues, right? This is kind of normal for any weapon system that's deployed for that long. So what can we do in the interim? What do we plan to do? And what is in this budget? And this present budget's request, and what this budget really does for us is it starts to say, let's take advantage of these regional systems that have been so successful and are very flexible and deployable. So Aegis ships, Aegis Ashore, the SM-3 Block 2A missile, we're going to test against a simple ICBM this year. We're going to do that here in the near term. That is not the only test that we'll do. So when we prove that we can take out an ICBM with an Aegis ship or an Aegis Ashore site with an SM-3 Block 2A, then you want to ramp up the evolution of the threat on the target side, right? We'll want to go against more complex threats. You have to make sure you upgrade the combat system that's on the ship so it can take in, engage on remote data from other sensors, and it can control the missile and do that. We've upgraded the Romanian site so that it can fire the SM-3 Block 2As. We're proliferating that capability out there today on the ships. Flexibility for the combatant commanders, again, flexibility in different theaters with that missile type that can then take on an ICBM. So that's one of the layers. So when we say layered homeland defense, what we mean is we want to give the country options. We want Northern Command, Indo-PACOM, wherever you happen to be, to have the flexibility to say, I'm going to launch a GBI against this particular threat type. If I have NGIs downstream, I can now have a trade between those. If I want to do particularly defense of a particular area that I'm really concerned about, I can park a ship there, or I can build an Aegis Ashore site, and I can launch SM-3 Block 2As. So part of that story is, what can you do about that? Right, so we're challenging ourselves with that, and we have a study ongoing today. I can't give you particulars. What I do know, and what I will share with you, is the synergy that we get with the Saudi Arabia case, where we're building that lineup again. We're going to start building TPY-2s again. We're going to start building the battery. We're going to do improvements leveraging an FMS case on the missile that can then be leveraged into homeland defense as another layer. So I grew up on cruisers and destroyers. It's all about layered defense. Long-range missiles kill the Archer as they come in and they leak through, then you take them out with a mid-range or a regional defense, and then you get to self-defense. That's really almost the model that we're looking at for a homeland defense capability. And I think, as an American citizen, I can sleep better at night knowing that I've got layered defense in case that there's a leaker. Does
And just on the THAAD interceptor, if you could talk a little bit more about the characteristics that you're looking for that.
It's in the
why-
trade space. It's in the engineering trade space today. One of the reasons why THAAD is such an attractive weapon to use against ICBMs, and we haven't gone against those yet, by the way, right? So that the system wasn't designed for that, but we know there's capability within that weapon system, total weapon system, and within that missile itself. So we may consider, an upgraded propulsion stack to give it extended range. Don't know yet. One of the benefits is when you're engaging along the edge of the atmosphere in space is countermeasures strip off. And so there's goodness in having it operate in that space. It could be that we don't want to update the propulsion. Maybe there's something in the seeker that would buy us more. So in the trade space now, and that's really a new start for us, and we're working our way through what that program would look like. But we're going to go to a demo in the mid-20s.
Okay, sir, I didn't catch your name.
Sorry, Anson Mercer with the Asahi Shimbun. A quick question on the development or upgrading of these missile systems. So you were discussing the development of Aegis and THAAD on the Korean Peninsula, but when it comes to Aegis ashore in Japan, have those new missiles have been deployed to that layered defense on the Japanese mainland? What sort of cooperation are we looking forward in 21 with the Japanese self-defense force?
We have a great established relationship with Japan already. Japan builds Aegis ships today. They deploy. They're interchangeable with U.S. ships, in the Sea of Japan, and even it's becoming almost a global kind of partnership there. And as you know, they have through an FMS case procured 2 Aegis ashore sites. When they came in with their request, they wanted an integrated air and missile defense version of that, and what that would leverage the full capability that you have on a ship today. So you have a 360 radar. They're asking for a solid state radar, so they're going to do a direct commercial sales for a solid state radar. So it's a different configuration than what we have in Europe. And we're going to start with the baseline capability of anti-ballistic missile defense. And then when they're ready to move to the next step of bringing in other air defense type missiles, we can do that. And so we're working that with Japan right now. We've got the baseline ballistic missile defense case with the solid state radar, and they're assuming they're going to use SM-3 Block 2As, which is a great assumption, and that's what they're investing in now. So they'll be part of that production over the course of the next few years.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Paul.
Paul McCleary with Breaking Defense. I wanted to follow up on the Aegis Ashore site in Poland. You said it's going to be delayed until 2022. It's already been delayed a few times. I think it was supposed to be done in 2018 or 2019 originally. And is this $96 million, is that on top of the original funding for this site?
I'll talk to you about the delays, and Michelle, you can talk about the funding.
Yes, it is.
So
It's through the extension and having to maintain the systems that are already there to extend the construction timeline.
Yeah, and I'll give you just a little bit as to what drives the delays. I've taken a hard look at it since I've been on board, and in fact, Admiral Drugan, who runs the Aegis BMD program, is inbound now to New York to meet with the Army Corps. So it's in 2 phases. You have the military construction portion. There's really a Navy naval base portion that the Navy does, and then the Army Corps builds all of the major support buildings and what we call the deck house, because it's very similar to the top end of a destroyer. So you have that, and then we have the phase 2 piece, which is the weapon system. The weapon system is on site and has been on site in temperature controlled containers. We are ready to install and do checkout, classic like we do on ships and like we've done at other Aegis Ashore sites. Our problem has been in the construction, but kind of beyond that, where this is challenging in military construction and where the current constructor has had problems in that last tactical mile, which is, you'll hear numbers like 92% complete. Well, the part that's not complete is what we really need, which is auxiliary controls, heating, power, cooling, the things that feed a combat system. And that's where that design and engineering that is inside that construction contract has slowed down, and where the contractor's having problems. So we did an independent assessment of that back in December. We sent our team in, took a look at it. We had reached back to very qualified constructors to assess where we really were. It's a fixed price contract. That's the way the Army Corps does business. But we wanted to know exactly where we were, because is there something we could do to phase our way in earlier? Our conclusion is that we need to sit down with the Army Corps and look at contract options, and that's what we're doing now. So by the end of the month, I'll meet with General Semonite at the Army Corps, and he and I will stack hands on a way forward, which will involve, I believe, some contract modifications to the construction side to get us on track so that we can accelerate beyond, quicker than the 22 that we've estimated. That 22 number is based on what we know today and the progress and how things have gone over the last couple years. So it's a very conservative estimate, and that includes Navy acceptance, because you got to do that. That includes European command acceptance. And there's always something we talk about called technical capability declaration. We do that first. We say the system's up and ready to go. Navy, come accept. Yukon, come accept. We're very focused in on that end game. So 22 is kind of what we see as the worst case. We're going to try to pull that in by working closely with the Army Corps.
You expect to bring in a new contractor to finish it up?
We don't know yet. There's a whole stream of options. Some of them, are straightforward, but can we execute them? We got to look at all the legalities between MILCON and what we can do on the development side. It's tough, but we've got full agreement that something needs to be done, and so we'll more than likely by the end of the month have a go path on what we're going to go do. Thank you.
Lee.
Lee Hudson, Aviation Week. Hi. I wanted to ask you about the ground-based interceptors. It looks like you're planning to buy 5 in this fiscal year, and I was wondering, are you going to buy any additional in the out years, or are you waiting until the next generation interceptor comes online?
So I'll have to, maybe you can share with me afterwards the 5 that you're seeing, because I'm not aware. We are not procuring an additional 5 GBIs this year. Okay. It could be the silos, I'm not sure, but we can talk about that. And so, as the Admiral mentioned, we are going through the RFP and selection timeframe over the next couple of years, at which time we'll be understanding exactly when we'll start procurement of the next generation interceptors.
Okay, thank you.
Marcus.
Hi, Marcus Weiss, with Defense One. Can we go back to the layered Homeland Defense for a second? Admiral, if I understood you correctly, you're assessing now whether or not you're going to put interceptors in the ground around cities in the country. You mentioned parking the destroyer off the coast,
sure,
but it kind of sounded like, reading between the lines, that's also something under consideration. I'm on the right track.
I would say all options are on the table. So when we look at our experience with Aegis Ashore in Romania, we have a site in Hawaii. When you look at how the threat's growing, how you're going to see increased numbers, you're going to see more complexity. So the layered makes sense to us, but we have a lot more work to go before we can say, oh, we're going to put sites here, or we're going to put missiles there. We're not ready to say that at this point. We're really in the study phase. What we really need to do is come through this SM3 test this year to ensure that we've got capability. So that's really step one. And then we'll have the discussion on where you might keep those assets and where they would be the most effective.
And also, NASAM seems to come up on a lot of Raytheon's earnings calls these days, and its deployment around the world, I guess, in other places. Are you looking also into using NASAMs in other places around the country as part of that layered defense?
Yeah, NASAMs is part of a cruise missile defense architecture. It's tied to what we're doing, but it's really not. When I speak in terms of layered homeland defense against ballistic missiles, that system is really built for something else.
Justin.
Hey, thanks. I just wanted to ask, you just built, I think, 20 new silos up at Fort Greely, Alaska. Now that the RKV is canceled, what are you putting in those silos?
Yeah, so those silos won't be complete until we come through 21. And we challenged ourselves back when we canceled the RKV program, should we stop doing what we're doing? But the missile fields were going along under schedule, under cost, just on track. We've always had I would say the program was always a little hardware poor, and we needed those additional silos to do basic maintenance. If you're gonna pull a missile out and do maintenance on it, you want to put another one in its spot. You need the ability to move them around. So in the near term, it provides us flexibility for maintenance and repair, and that's what we're going to leverage them for. And then when we start building more missiles, that's when we'll actually use the silos.
And on that point, to what extent will the NGI use existing GMD infrastructure like the silos or?
Yeah, it's right now we are designing to the existing infrastructure. We've done a systems-wide look, and so if you're to look at the requirements for that missile, it is part of a system. So the ground-based systems and the constraints of the silos are part of that.
Hanson?
Yeah. So on the INF treaty, so Russia and the United States both left the INF treaty. China was never a part of it. But have there been any changes to the current budget with regard to possibly protecting against these new intermediate range missiles that would possibly be more prevalent? Or is that kind of already being taken care of?
More of a policy question. I don't really have an answer for you. I can't address that.
Jen, please.
So maybe I'm missing something, but I didn't see anything on Pacific radars. Is there a new plan there for Pacific sensors to fill the mid-course gap at this point? And if there isn't, I think it was about 2.5 billion that you were looking at spending on Pacific radars. Where would that be redirected? Would that be to the space layer or something else?
Yeah, if you remember last year, we pushed Pacific radar to the right because of host nation issues that we have to come through. We still have that issue, and Pacific radar is no longer in our budget. We've moved it out. And I can't tell you where it goes because I don't know. It goes to other DoD priorities.
Dan.
Thank you. The budget mentions an initial two-stage capability for, I guess, legacy GBIs, almost as a software upgrade.
Yeah.
Is that something that you would do where it just doesn't fire off its final stage, or is that a hardware thing?
No, that's done through guidance and control on the missile. So what a 2-3 stage selectable GBI is allows you to burn all 3 stages so you can shoot out really far, and as that threat continues to come in, then you don't need to burn that 3rd stage, and so it gives a command more flexibility again. So shoot out far or take things that are coming over your head, and by not burning that 3rd stage. So it's kind of that simple. And so we're planning to go to a test for that. We're going through the engineering analysis now. We're reviewing the software changes required to do that. But it's in my mind, it's almost a no-brainer capability that we ought to get out there as soon as we can.
So would you then still also consider buying the 2-stage boosters, or is that off the table?
Like not build a missile with a 3rd stage?
Correct.
No, we would always want to have the flexibility to burn a 3rd stage and go out far. Hit them out as far as you can.
Tony.
It's like on NGI, on the funding, 4.9 in the FIDP. If you have that, can you break out how much is in 21 and the procurement R&D breakout? This is in the interest of those
Right,
competing in it.
so in FY21, the RDT&E budget is $638 million. There is no procurement in FY21 as that has moved out further until we're ready to build those missiles.
So then the remainder of that 4.9 billion is all R&D?
Inside the FIDP, yes. And then once we award the contract and understand the achievable schedule and procurement timeline, then we will change those appropriations if need be.
And end of a decision by December or in December to down select?
So no, the decision would be to award. So we're going to, after we put out the RFP, then there's a specific amount of time for, and I just don't recall what it is, where the we do the technical evaluation on the bids that come in, and then we'll make the award at the end of the year.
Okay, in December, roughly by December then?
End of the year, yes, sir.
Okay. And
So-
and it's 20 is the goal?
Yes.
And is it a winner take all, or is that still at this point kind of?
We're actually funded to have 2 suppliers for risk reduction through at least preliminary design review. That's another thing when you asked us, what we're doing different and what we learned, right? So you got a competition in place. We have the ability now to carry 2. So the department has supported that to, help, do the risk reduction piece, and then we'll pick the right point in time to do down select. Right now, we're funded through PDR. And there's plenty of arguments out there that you got to go all the way to the CDR. So we'll have that conversation when the time's right.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
We got time for about 2 more. Justin.
I just wanted to ask about technology maturation initiatives, because it looks like they took a pretty significant cut. What are you canceling or jettisoning or otherwise not funding in this year's budget compared to last year's?
I'll take a stab at a couple of them. So I wouldn't call it jettisoning or dumping. It's kind of a shift in the priorities on how we do things, across the department. Directed energy is a great example of that, where the department had come in and said, let's have a consolidated approach. Dr. Griffin stood up as assistant director for directed energy. They built roadmaps. We lined up to those roadmaps, and what that does, that allows us to work on different types of technologies, and they reach a certain power level, for example. Is that the gate to where you would then send it off to industry? That's one way to do it. Or is that the gate to say, this doesn't really apply to missile defense, let's give it to the Navy? or really this will work really well up in the atmosphere on an aircraft, so let's give it to the Air Force. So it's a more holistic DoD approach. So even though you won't see those dollars in our budget, I'm absolutely confident that when the technology gets to where it needs to be, that MDA has access to that technology and can bring that down and use it.
So, but on directed energy, you're saying that that's no longer really on the table for the Missile Defense Agency?
For 21, that budget was reduced.
And you're no longer thinking we're going to have a test by, what was it, 25 or something like that? I guess
We won't be pursuing that right now.
Phil?
Well, I was just hoping you could elaborate a little bit on the TP2 project. You know, is the idea that if you just tell me what the goal is, is the idea to have a more integrated system than you have now? Is it just that it's, in the last several years, it's proven, not as robust as you wanted? What's the thinking?
For TPY2?
Yeah.
For associated with a THAAD battery or for the Homeland Defense version?
Well, my understanding from what you were briefing before, you were talking about an upgrade to the system, and I thought you were talking about the ones in the Middle East, but I wasn't sure.
Yeah, I'm having a hard time tracking where we were in that conversation. So was this tied to the Jon in South Korea, or was I talking about THAAD upgrades?
Or was it in reference to when I mentioned that we're spending money to sustain it as well as continue software upgrades to it?
That's great.
Yeah. So every radar across the fleet, we are constantly going in and updating the algorithms for something we call discrimination. That's your ability to pick out the lethal object in a complex. Radars are attracted to track everything, and there's just some things we don't want it to track, right? We want to get right down to the lethal object. So there are discrimination improvements that we do. What we're working on with the Army for the THAAD batteries is to, as we do remove and replace of, say, specific modules, we'll update from gallium arsenide to gallium nitride. So we're going to an all-GaN radar face, and we've got a modernization plan that is basically a maintenance, replace and remove and replace strategy with the Army. When we go to the KSA FMS case, those are going to be built straight up as GaN radars. And so if we do it right, we'll have the GaN radars that are part of the FMS case that the Army can then leverage or MDA can leverage over time if we increase numbers of batteries. But we're also taking the other radars that are forward deployed and those ones that are associated with THAAD batteries, and we're upgrading them because that gives you more power and sensitivity, and it's a much more reliable radar. Does that make sense? Okay.
Jen, I'll let you close it out.
So just to follow up on the Pacific radar issue, if you aren't going to get these sensors anytime soon, what would you do to handle the mid-course gap there? What are some of the things that you could maybe fill in there?
Yeah, so really the Pacific radar was taking us to the next evolution of where we estimate the threat to be. Today in that region you have forward deployed TPY2 radars that handle that load. We have a deployable SBX radar that handles that load. You've got Aegis ships with their radars that are mobile and can be repositioned as appropriate. So that's really the answer for how you handle that in the near term. The important thing though is part of those discussions as we're coming through this president's budget is we realize we need to take another look at that architecture. And so the Secretary of Defense has commissioned a study for us to look at the sensor architecture specifically in the Indo-PACOM region, and what do we need to do and what other options do we have. Okay.
All right, folks, that's all the time we have for today. Admiral, Ms. Atkinson, thank you very much for your time. And folks, I'll close it up here. The transcript should be posted on defense.gov tomorrow. And I'll be happy to follow up. If you have any questions, I'll stick around for a minute or two, and we'll see what we can do for you. Thank you for coming.
All right. Good to see you, Jen. Thanks. Thank you.